and doing the West Coast thing, first in Anaheim, a little afternoon game in the middle of the week, and then on to Oakland and Seattle into the weekend and next week. Meantime, all attention now on the Purple Birds. I don't know if the Colin Kaepernick thing's going to happen or not going to happen. Certainly not going to happen in Miami now that Jay Cutler has come. And a new week and a different drama. And I guess, Luke, the story this week is Flacco, the back, and maybe more than that, the Redskins on Thursday night as we all gather and pay full price for fake football. And even Commissioner Goodell thinks that's a bad idea, right?
Yeah, it's always that excitement. You know, I call it one of the ultimate football buzz kills. You get excited, preseason opener, and 5 minutes into it, you say, well, this isn't actually football. But clearly, I mean, you look at the Ravens right now, I think the biggest storyline as far as just players on the roster is, just looking at the overall health of the team or lack thereof. With Joe Flacco kind of heading the list, they had hoped it would only be a week. Clearly, it's been longer than that. We're pushing a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. And you would think if he doesn't get back on the practice field this week, that he's obviously not playing in the preseason opener. I mean, that's already out. That's not even in the conversation. You would think if he's not back on the field this week at some point, probably not going to play in that second preseason game either. When you just look at the timing of it, I know John Harbaugh was asked about it at the Naval Academy on Saturday night about Flacco's status. He says continues to get better, but he's at least not offering up the idea that they have a time frame of when he's getting back on the practice field. They have a plan in place as far as football work and how they're going to get him back in there, but at least according to Harbaugh on Saturday, Mark Smith and the training staff had not yet given the heads up for Flacco or the thumbs up for Flacco to start practicing. So in the meantime, it's Ryan Mallett and Colin Kaepernick. That whole thing it's still possible, but there hasn't been it's been very, very quiet on that front. So you wonder if that means the Ravens have ultimately decided not to do it.
By the way, I was positive on it. I was last week, and I want to give the guy a fair shake. Dude, the tweet about Bisciotti as the slave driver, that would have pushed me over the top. That would have said, you're not going to play on my football team. For me. And well, I don't know if Steve feels that way, but for me.
For clarification, that was his girlfriend.
Right. I got you, but that's unacceptable.
No, I hear you loud.
That doesn't work.
I mean, that's tough.
It wouldn't work if it was your sister or your mother doing that to me. That wouldn't work.
Right. I mean, it's just, ultimately, you can talk about freedom of speech, but you have consequences for free. You can say a lot of things in this country, and, you won't get thrown in jail, but you'll get fired or, you'll lose friends or you'll alienate family. I mean, there are some consequences there. But just getting back to the Ravens, beyond Flacco, Brashad Perriman's still sidelined. Jimmy Smith's been dealing with a quote tweak, but John Harbaugh said he should be back on the field as early as Monday. So, Marlon Humphrey, their first-round pick, has missed a few practices in a row. So, beyond the season-ending injuries that they've dealt with, it seems like those, even though you're glad that they're not season-ending injuries, but seems like some of those other ailments have kind of stricken some players on the roster, and they've had a growing number of players missing practice. So, it's first preseason game. I guess you spin it and say, well, it gives you a chance to see Ryan Mallett with the rest of the first teamers, at least the ones who are going to play. But quite a few players sidelined, and you do wonder, with Flacco being out, is there much value to having Mike Wallace and Jeremy Maclin playing much in the first preseason game? Is there much value on the defensive side of the ball, some of your veterans playing? Probably not. So as much as we'll get excited or try to get excited for the preseason opener, I'm guessing come Thursday night we're going to see quite a few key players on the sideline and not between the trenches or in the trenches.
All right, so give me a couple guys to watch for Thursday night, and I'll probably come back and ask you this in the game preview. Yeah. We can go through some guys here, and I think we all sort of know intellectually the guys to watch aren't Terrell Suggs and Marshall Yanda, right, or Sam Cook, or even Justin Tucker for that matter. But the guys that are fringy and the guys that are rookie-ish, and maybe some of the guys on the backfields that you have seen flash a little bit, that may flash a little bit of that. I mean, certainly the pass rush and the defense, no matter how this turns out on Thursday, we're going to be watching that part of the game.
Oh, there's no question about it. And there are actually quite a few players, I think, to watch that are, kind of below the radar, not even on the radar with most fans, because I'm not naive enough to think that all Ravens fans are following tweets of every single practice every single day. And I mean, there's just a lot. There's a lot of minutia this time of year, and that's always the caution that I'll throw out there. Before I get into naming a few names, we're not even to the first preseason game yet. And I can tell you so many different players, from Justin Harper to any number of defensive linemen, linebackers, corners, so many different players who I thought looked really good in the spring or the first couple weeks of training camp, and they disappear. So that's always a disclaimer. But I'll say this. This is probably the first time in a long time, maybe as long as I've been covering Ravens training camps, which my first camp was 2009, that I can remember so many intriguing rookie free agents. And a couple of them have gotten some attention at wide receiver, one being Tim White, really, really fast wide receiver, not a big guy, 5'10", 180 pounds out of Arizona State, but he flies. He's someone who's made some plays as a receiver. I think he's someone to watch as a return man, with that competition being wide open. And the other wide receiver that has really come on here over the last week, after I thought he was relatively quiet in the spring and the first 4 or 5 practices, and that's Quincy Attaboy-Joe. And
I saw he did a little post-gamer there. He's got a great haircut, too. We got a lot of guys with great haircuts on this team.
Yeah, but he's 6'3", 197, so you like that.
You notice him. When he walks by, you're like, hey, he looks like a player, right?
He's a bigger guy. He's from Ole Miss, runs well. I think, considering he's a rookie, I've been fairly impressed with his route running. And this is a kid that's beaten even accomplished corners on the roster. I've seen him get behind Jimmy Smith. I've seen him get behind Brandon Carr. I've seen him get behind Ladarius Webb when lined up at the nickel spot. This is a guy who's made a lot of plays. And, I think Steve Smith told, Keenan Reynolds talked on Saturday. He had a nice practice on Saturday night, by the way. But in making a comment, Steve Smith told Keenan Reynolds as a rookie wide receiver last year that when you're trying to get noticed, when you're trying to hang around, you need to make one big play per practice. And Quincy Attaboy-Joe has done that. And he's done that even more than once in the course of a given practice at times. So he's someone I'm really looking forward to watching in the preseason. It's been tough to evaluate wide receivers because, frankly, Ryan Mallett has been at best up and down.
Has that gotten better a little bit? I mean, it feels like it has the last couple of days, right?
He's practiced better over the last 4 to 5 days. He's practiced better. Look, he's not Joe Flacco. I mean, we know that. I mean, the fact that he's making $2 million this year, that's one of the lowest paid backup quarterbacks you're going to find in the NFL. And by the way, you know my philosophy on that. I am a card-carrying member of the don't pay my backup quarterback any money. Because
he's going to suck anyway, right?
Yeah, I think it's a sunk investment anyway. Find a guy that you think is good enough to maybe win you a game or two. And Ryan Mallett beat the Steelers 2 years ago, so he might be that guy. I don't know, but getting back to my point, it's been difficult to evaluate the offense because the quarterback play. You think Mallett has had his bad moments. Dustin Vaughn, and now it's just Josh Woodrum. They had Olsen in here before. I mean, it's been ugly, and frankly, at times the offense has had difficulty just functioning. And how much of that is a testament to the defense being really, really good? That's part of it. But when you have times where the offense isn't lining up properly, and pre-snap penalties, and just lots of mistakes, and when receivers are open, quarterbacks are not hitting them, it's been a mess. But through all that, I've really liked what I've seen of those 2 rookie wide receivers. So there are 2 names to watch. On the defensive side, I'll tell you the guy who might have the best chance of any rookie free agent to make this roster. And frankly, as it stands right now, again, go back to the disclaimer, he's got to play, got to flash in the preseason. The lights come on, he's got to produce. But Patrick Ricard, a defensive lineman who I've seen line up at nose, I've seen him at the 3 technique, I've even seen him at the 5 technique. He has been incredibly impressive 6'3", 304 pounds, out of Maine. He has made plays. He stood his ground against the run. I've seen him absolutely abuse some offensive linemen, not necessarily starting offensive linemen, but at least guys that are in the mix to make the roster. And he has just done a really impressive job. And he's the guy that I've heard Dean Pease mention unprovoked. I've heard John Harbaugh bring him up unprovoked. That's what you have to really go off of. At this time of year, and you know it very well, Nestor, having covered this team all these years, when you ask a coach about a player, they're not going to say, oh, this guy stinks. They're not going to say this guy can't play. Unless it's someone who they're really trying to light a fire under with, that's lacking in effort. They always say, what? This guy's doing well. We've seen a lot of growth. He really practices hard, or he loves to play football. You hear all that. So really, when you hear a compliment, to me, it means very little unless they bring someone up whose name wasn't even mentioned. And that's happened with Patrick Ricard a couple times. So he, more than even the wide receivers that I talked about a couple minutes ago, is someone to watch. So to me, he's kind of the number one rookie free agent. And I'll give you one rookie free agent corner, Jalen Hill, 5'10", not a big corner by any means, but I know he's someone that turned some heads in the spring. Seen him make some plays here over the first couple of weeks of camp. 5'10", 178 pounds, so he's light. He's a nickel kind of guy out of Jacksonville State. They have a need at the nickel right now, and not that I would bet on him being the guy, but if he plays well enough, he could play himself into the roster conversation because clearly they've lost Tavon Young. Maurice Kennedy is out long-term, even if he is going to be back at some point during the season. They've been practicing with Ladarius Webb as their nickel, which I think in a perfect world, you'd much rather have him serving as safety depth. You'd rather have him playing safety and maybe you slide Tony Jefferson down to the dime spot in sub packages.
But at least he knows where to line up, right? I mean, that's the good news. You got a quarterback back
there. That's
there.
absolutely true. But he's pretty, he's long in the tooth at this point. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was moved to safety because he couldn't play corner anymore, and that was a couple years ago. So now Ladarius Webb at age, he'll be 32 in October. I'm not sure I love the idea of him being the guy as their nickel corner, and we know nickel defense has essentially become the base defense in today's NFL. You play nickel usually well over 50% of the time in most games. So we'll see. I mean, that's the spot on this defense. Beyond just the questions of the pass rush, needing a couple young pass rushers to step forward, as much as I like Matt Judon, Tim Williams has been very impressive.
He's the guy to watch, right? I thought he'd be the first guy, your first name off your lips would have been him.
Yeah. I didn't mention him because he's a little more on the radar being a draft pick. I mean, I mentioned a few guys that a lot of fans might be listening haven't even heard of if they haven't been following.
And might never hear of again.
Right, and they might not, right. But, yeah, Tim Williams, as far as one-on-one pass rushing drills, he has been the most impressive. And look, Terrell Suggs having a fine camp, but Suggs isn't out there, giving 120% every play. He's pacing himself. He doesn't have anything to prove as he's in year 15, at least at this time of year. Now, come regular season and late in the season, sure. We could talk about that, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But of all their young pass rushers, and when they do one-on-one drills or when they do drills where basically half of the offensive line lines up against half the defensive line, Williams has consistently beaten offensive linemen, even sometimes against the likes of Ronnie Stanley and James Hurst, who are guys that are going to be on this roster. And certainly in the case of Ronnie Stanley, a guy they hope is going to be a Pro Bowl caliber player in the very near future. So good to see that. We know the baggage. One-dimensional guy. He's not going to be someone who's on the field on 1st and 10. I wouldn't think. He's not going to be playing in the base defense. But 2nd and 12, certainly third down situations where it's an obvious passing situation. I would not be surprised to see him on the field quite a bit sooner rather than later. At least based on what we've seen. Good quick twitch off the edge. And also someone who's shown, for a rookie, has shown some sophistication in some of his moves. A lot of times rookie pass rushers, they take some time to develop, and they got to develop their technique, got to get stronger with their hands. got to learn some different moves, maybe learn some moves from a savvy vet like a Terrell Suggs, for example. But I've seen him do some different things. I've seen him beat guys off the edge. I've seen him cut back in against guys. I've seen him use a swim move. He's been impressive. So of all their rookie draft picks, he's been the guy that's been most impressive. Marlon Humphrey been really good the first week, but as I mentioned, dealing with some kind of a minor issue right now. I think it's a leg issue. We haven't gotten confirmation from John Harbaugh, but looks like he's close to practicing. He was out on the field working out before Saturday's practice at Navy. But beyond Humphrey, at the very least, I've been most impressed with Tim Williams, and I'm not sure it's even been close. That's how impressive he's been in pass rushing situations.
He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke. He will be, along with the rest of us, bored out of our minds at some point in the early going on Thursday night as we all gather, hopefully under decent weather. Dude, it's the Redskins. We can all get behind hating on them, right? Even their preseason guys, right? You put that uniform on, I got a problem.
Oh, no doubt. And when you see how much, we've talked about the Ravens' problems, and sure, they've had their issues with injuries really here over the last 2 months, going back to Pitta and Tavon Young. But when you're talking about Washington, with the way that they totally botched the Kirk Cousins situation, with the way that they fired their general manager at the start of free agency, I mean, it's when you see some of the players that they lost in the offseason, I think you take a look at that and you say, yeah, the Ravens have their problems, but I'll take the Ravens' problems over what they're dealing with. I think anyone looking at it objectively would have to say that.
Well, we'll sit back and watch and wait. And I mean, is there any indication of what the Flacco plan would be if he's better tomorrow morning? Like, what would that look like? Just the third game, I would think at this point for a little while would be a really nice little thing. I mean, I think if we get down to the wire and he's playing in New Orleans on scrub night, that's probably not good, right?
Yeah, I don't think you'd want to. I mean, I think when you look at that fourth preseason game, and especially now, because keep in mind, there's no roster cut down, so it's going to be a full 90-man roster. I think you're going to see teams being even more conservative with their meaningful players, and you're going to have overzealous guys trying to make the teams for both sides, where I don't know if you want your franchise quarterback out there under any circumstance, even if he can't play in the third preseason game. But if he gets back on the practice field this week, could I see a scenario where maybe he would get a brief amount of time against Miami in the second one? Maybe. At this point, I probably wouldn't bet on it. I would think they would probably just hold off and wait till that third preseason game. And, I mean, it's kind of what they dealt with last year with Joe coming off the knee issue. And I would think you want to be very, very careful with him. So, I mean, it's even for the third preseason.
He's got to get out there and run around with Macklin and these guys at some point, right? And certainly the O-line, right?
Right. I mean, you want to be conservative, and I think they've been smart with that. And look, if he needs another week, fine. Knock yourself out. They're still just under 5 weeks away from the start of the season, so there's still time. But you start running into, if he's missing much more than another week, then you're really you're behind the eight ball as far as seeing if you're going to be able to get him on the field for any preseason action. And as you said, I mean, this was an offense that was, they've got a couple new pieces that you'd like him to be able to work with, and just in general, this was not a good offense last year. And we all agree that even if it wasn't all on him by any stretch, Joe needs to be better than he was last year. And for him to miss that much practice time, for him to potentially not get preseason time, and again, we're not saying that, but if that would play out that way, then you're concerned about what the offense is going to look like, especially early in the season under that circumstance. But you hope it's all moot point. You hope he gets back on the practice field at some point here over the next week. You would think that would give him plenty of time to prepare, that he could get some quality work in the third preseason game, at least 2 or 3 series, something along those lines at a bare minimum. That to me, that would be, if you don't get that, then you're really starting to be concerned. But there's some time there. You want to be smart. I think that's what they've been trying to do. The 1 week was always the best case scenario. The impression that I always got talking to people in the organization was it was going to be 1 week of rest, and then they evaluated. It wasn't 1 week and then he was 100% cleared to practice necessarily. They wanted to be smart. I think that's what they're trying to do. I know it's been concerning from a perception standpoint with Ryan Mallett and the offense looking so ugly.
And they also would like to have him out there throwing the football just period, right?
Yeah, I mean of course. So
there's a lot of passes to be thrown out there on the backfields this time.
There are. So, I'm not saying that these practices are meaningless by any means. There's absolutely value to it. But at the same time, Ryan Mallett throwing 3 or 4 picks in a practice, like some of the really bad practices that he's had to this point, that doesn't. The Ravens don't get tagged with a loss for that. So if that's the difference of getting Flacco back and healthy and staying healthy, not just coming back on the practice field and the back flaring up 5 days later, if that's the difference, I think you have to take it, and you have to just take a deep breath and relax and remind yourself we're still in the first week of August.
All right, we are still in the first week of August, and they'll be reminding you of that all week long here. Luke will be with me, and I will be with him. Redskins, Ravens, we're going to be up late watching the Orioles all week long. You'll definitely want to monitor all that. And all the fake news on the Colin Kaepernick signing in Baltimore. When you get it on the WNST text service, you know it's true. That's as simple as that. Been a decade now. We've never let you down. We don't break fake news around here. Ask around, jump on the service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. No one will be happier to have fake football here than Dennis Kolatzis. He'll be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home with the SSV on WNST. And, of course, our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox, also with no fake news. That happens at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's always brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, the BuyAToyota.com Audio Vault is always there for you with everything we do here on demand, where you want it, how you want it, mobilely, downloaded, podcasted. Listen to it. It is the BuyAToyota.com Audio Vault. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. I am a very available individual. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We got some great conversations this week. I'm stoked about my guest list. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.